Well, why don't you stick around anyway, you might learn something. I'm Solid Sword.
My name is Eski. This is my first time running this panel too. My first time panel running ever. I feel like it's also my first panel.
So, without further ado, I figure we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to give one warning right now to everybody. Spoilers ahead. We're pretty much assuming that you've played the games. We try not to spoil too much, but you are going to learn some things about games that maybe you haven't played, and maybe it'll make you maybe that will make you want to play them. So, what is this all about? We're looking at video games in this idea that they are kind of cultural art. They reflect the culture of the creator, reflect the culture of the audience. When you choose to read a book, you read something that you like because you can relate to it. When you write a video game or play a video game, the same thing applies. How many of you play through a game where you can't relate to anyone? You don't. Okay, I see one hand in the back.
There's always a lecherous dude.
Thank you, Scott. And it's just like visual art, painting, sculpture, music, plays, opera, movies. It's all the same. And we're looking at two broad categories when we're talking about the mythology in the video games. We're looking at those games that say, okay, we're going to take a mythological story and we're going to distill it down into a video game. Games like Okami, Megaten. The Megaten series, of course, robs from every culture ever. The Suikoden series. That's one we're going to touch on quite a bit because it's both Western and Japanese, but the Japanese influences are very strong. But then there's the games that reflect that background. Design choices, character design, enemies. But they don't directly draw on it. And these are games like the older Atelier games and the newer ones. Again, Suikoden because of the Western influences, and the Saga series, which some of you older members may know as Final Fantasy Legend. So.
Smattering of games. So pretty much these are games that draw directly from cultural backgrounds. So the ones that we're going to be touching upon are going to be among the Toho series, the Okami series, Kantai Collection, Yokai Watch, and Shin Megami Tensei, which we've already mentioned that draws from all cultures. And these are examples of games that pretty much just show a cultural influence, more or less cultural baggage. They are inspired by it, but it's pretty much that's all there is, either design choices or that's just the name of the monster from the legend that they choose to use. These are going to be Suikoden, Fatal Frame, Touken Ranbu, which is essentially Monopoly, it is sword boys instead of ship girls. The Final Fantasy series, they use mostly monster designs. General Survivor Horror series you're going to see just use kind of like monsters here and there, ghosts particularly. And ghost houses in certain series as well, like I said, they just use the ghost stories that they are inspired from.
Something you're going to learn here is the Japanese really love the ghost stories. The Western tradition has nothing on Japan in terms of the volume of ghost stories.
Just two more other popular RPG series with the Final Fantasy series and the Dragon Quest series. They actually don't really use Japanese mythology as like a main story plot or development plot. It's very much as a niche series. And you also got a series like Star Ocean, which really doesn't use Japanese influences too much either. It's very much more Lovecraftian.
Yeah, especially if you play through the first Star Ocean game. They were taken straight from H.P. Lovecraft for a lot of their ideas when they weren't ripping off of Star Trek.
And yeah, like we said, it's not always going to be a clear-cut cultural distinction. Good creators are aware that their cultural baggage, like Zune, who the creator of Toho, they revel in it. They would take all these inspirations from all of their mythologies, create a character based around it or a storyline, and make that their center point for each game. And some of the most popular games we've mentioned, we don't really draw. Like here in the West, we don't really draw mythology too much unless they're probably biblical, but even then we're doing very distilled versions of it in storylines, or more or less we're using cliches.
All right. Now we're going to be, like I said, we're going to be drawing some distinctions here to give an idea of where we're coming from. East and West. In the East, your mythology tends to be very, what I like to think of as gray. There's not necessarily a defined good or defined evil. Yes, some of your gods are more virtuous than others are more mischievous. Whereas in the West, in most cases, and again, all of these should be thought of as in most cases, is very dualistic. You have good, and if you're not good, you're evil, and that's the end. Your Eastern deities, your Eastern poltergeists, yokai, are more malevolent or mischievous as opposed to very rigidly cast in a single role. Stronger connections to the natural world versus not so much. I mean, we hear about Zeus as the god of lightning, the king of the gods. How often does he really create lightning in the Greek myths? Never. Never. It's just sort of assumed, whereas the yokai do their thing. And then, again, the mythology for the East assumes that many of these creatures, many of these spirits and such are in the world. They're not a separate world set apart. It's not Mount Olympus where nobody ever goes. They're in the shrine down the road, or it's that hill over there has a kami. And finally, cyclical and non-cyclical. This is the influence of Buddhism, especially, where you go around the wheel multiple times, whereas most of your Western traditions, it's one shot and you're done. And that's the end of it.
So we're going to actually be touching upon several myths that you do see in several video games. I'm going to pretty much explain to you the biggest one, which is Izanami and Izanagi. Now, these guys are essentially the creation myth. You'll see them in most stories all around. And this is their general background. You have Izanagi no Okami and Izanagi no Mikoto. They're called Great Lord Izanagi or Great God Izanami. So, once again, kind of like in Western mythology, you have the whole Izanami as his sister and also his wife, similar to Zeus and Hera. So, they gave birth to the islands of Japan, the archipelago of Japan, and they also gave birth to the majority of the Japanese pantheon. Izanami, however, died right after she gave birth to the fire god Kagutsuchi. And in his rage, Izanagi executed Kagutsuchi and proceeds to make the trip to Yomi, where it's the underworld, to retrieve his wife. Now, for Japanese mythology, gods themselves have a separate hell, and this will be touched upon later on as well. Their hell is Yomi. Whereas opposed to regular humans, they go through several different levels of hell. It can either be called Makai or just the underworld. So let's go through Yomi. Journey to Yomi and Izanagi's decay. Essentially what happens is that Izanagi is trying to get his wife out of hell. And this may sound familiar.
As Izanami is in hell, of course, she's rotting, she's dying, she's decaying. Just by show of hands here, how many of you out here are familiar at all with the Mega series?
Shin Megami Tensei.
Shin Megami Tensei. Persona.
Persona 4 specifically.
So quite a few of you. Let's see.
Haven't finished it.
Okay, and Okami would be the other one.
Anyone who's heard of Okami?
Good.
Very good. Very, very
So
good.
we know that when you go to hell, when you go to Yomi, you don't come back the same. This kind of parallels with Orpheus and Eurydice.
Eurydie, yes.
But more so.
Pretty much, yeah. How the East and West, they actually have similar myths that kind of reflect each other. They're not exactly the same. So yeah, the parallel for this legend would be Orpheus and Eurydice. And as Izanagi is traveling through Yomi, he is becoming tainted, he is becoming corrupted by the impurities of hell, and gods are supposed to be all pure. As Izanagi goes to wash his face before leaving Yomi, 3 gods are born from his face, which would be Amaterasu, Susanoo, and Tsukiyomi. Each of them are born from different parts of his face, which would be Amaterasu, the sun goddess, was born from the eye. Susanoo, god of the sea, was born from his nose. And Tsukiyomi, god of the moon, was born from his right eye.
For Susanoo, we can kind of compare him to the Western Leviathan. He is very much the Lord of the Seas, wrecks ships, etc.
Yes, he's known as the god of the storms and seas as well.
So we've gone down, we've come back. Now, where have we heard some of these stories before?
What we have up here is a screenshot from Persona 3, The Answer, where Aegis is trying to pick up the soul of Minato, which is the main protagonist who had his soul sealed in the end of Persona 3. So, other examples you see of this story being told is actually a gender-flipped example with Final Fantasy X-2, with the example being Yuna is trying to get Tidus, And you find him actually in the Inspira's version of the Underworld, which would be the Far World, I believe it's called. It's been a while since I played Final Fantasy X. But she didn't actually find Tidus there. As we all know, it's actually Shu Yin. But that's where she goes to find him because that's where she saw him, in that sphere. Persona 4 also revolves around this, but in a very different way. Persona 4's story more or less revolves around Izanami, who is essentially answering humanity's desire for destruction. And that way she is saying, okay, humanity is wishing to kind of seal their true selves, and they don't want people to know their true identity. It's a major plot in the game, so she covers it in Fog. I see there's a hand.
The Izanami is the one that died giving birth to the...
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. She died first and was very angry that Izanami could not get her out. Now, other examples that we see, I mentioned the Saga series before. Shirak is one of the gods in the Saga series, and she's basically trapped in her own personal hell. She's very angry about this. She gave up a lot, and I'll explain what she gave up later. She gave up a lot in order to protect humans, even though she didn't like us. She's grateful once you release her, but she is still very upset that she had to be locked away. You have to fight your way down to her and back.
Also, just to mention, if you guys are confused about anything, or if you have any other examples to share about any games that we just don't touch upon here, by all means, please raise your hands. We only do touch upon select amount of the games. Oh. Yes.
Are you gonna finish the story of when, like, Izanagi is going to save Izanami?
Yes, actually, that's going to be the next slide too, because that touches upon other video games.
Yeah, I don't know what is
Oh,
happening.
what? Oh dear.
Alright, talk about Oni Island Florida.
Yeah, the other example would be Okami's Oni Island, where Amaterasu herself has to go in there to fight Naito's. And she is essentially also saving a constellation, which is a part of herself in there too. So it's like she is essentially going to hell to save a incarnation of herself. Yes?
This is kind of random, but what does Toby symbolize in that little paper?
Toby essentially is supposed to symbolize that even yokai have a shred of humanity in themselves. He is essentially just a little demon that you don't really see him again.
I miss
Toby too. Yes. All right. So. Yeah, so let me just finish the story. So when Izanagi actually goes on to Yomi, he actually finds his wife there. However, by that time he already found her. She's already completely decayed. She's a rotting corpse. She smells horrible. She's nothing of what she used to be. Izanagi is disgusted and horrified and runs away from her because she is no longer the wife he knew. Naturally, this upsets Izanami so much that she pretty much sends her own demons that were in there to try to get him back. And Izanagi fought them off, and that's where I mentioned, he's trying to cleanse himself of these impurities he got kind of caught up on, and that's how the other gods were born. He manages to escape though. However, now he will never be able to see his beloved again. Once again, this reflects to the story of Irudai and Orpheus. Orpheus looked back, he can no longer get Irudai back, and that is your tragic love story. That is, what is touched upon. And once again, I want to bring up the last example here, Odin Sphere. If anyone has played that Vanillaware game, yes. Gwendolyn's story arc around the end, you notice that Oswald, her beloved, was captured and he was taken to the underworld, the version of the underworld. She goes over there to get him back because that's when she realized she loves him. And in order to do that, she has to fight the queen of the underworld, Hell, in order to do so. Now, in the game, she actually manages to beat her, and they are reunited. So this one game is a subversion of the legend, where the two tragic lovers are actually united, whereas in most games, they tend to just be separated. And it also caused the apocalypse, yes.
Yes.
It just seems like kind of Izanagi seemed like a jerk. He was like, oh, you're not pretty anymore, I'm leaving.
Not so much not pretty, but it wasn't just not pretty, she was pretty much a rotting corpse at that point.
And not to mention, she was completely and utterly, the gods have a thing of purity. She's no longer pure, she is no longer the person she used to be.
Then why did he try to go save her?
Because he thought they would be.
Yes.
He thought that she would still be. And then, now one other example here, and then I'll take a question. I noticed a good number of hands for Mega 10.
The Shin Megami Tensei franchise started as a modern retelling of this myth. Now we're actually talking about not Persona, not Shin Megami Tensei, the very original Megami Tensei series.
These were novels. They started out as novels back in the 80s, and it is a retelling of Izanagi as our protagonist, and Izanami as his girlfriend, love interest. And it retells it with computerized demons. It is exactly as trippy as it sounds. And you can understand why the series itself tends to be a little different. So I saw you brought
yeah, I was kind of wondering what you're defining as purity, because there are some gods who like specialize in destructive things, like Susanoo is a god of war, for example. So I don't know how much this would apply to gods outside of the Japanese traditions, but I was just kind of wondering about that.
Actually, Susanoo himself got excommunicated or exiled from the god's world because he was too destructive. You're going to actually see, we're going to actually touch upon this a little bit just with Materasu's myth, because that interacts with her own myth as well. So the gods themselves have kind of like a code of conduct, a code of ethics and stuff like that. Susanoo breaches it, everyone tells him to GTFO, and he now lives on Earth. That is his own legend.
And that's kind of what happened with Izanami as well. Because she'd been corrupted for so long, she couldn't return. She wouldn't be allowed back into the world of the gods, or into the regular world, because she had become part of Yomi at that point. She's not getting out.
She is no longer a god. She is now a denizen of the underworld. That would probably, yeah, that would mean like that's why she can't come out, because she is no longer a god.
Would Rochi be classified as a god, or is he a yokai?
He is a yokai.
Yokai. Now, when we use the term yokai, we're talking about all of these. In the same way that the Megaton series uses demon to refer to anything from a little tiny fairy up to, you know, the typical slathering, horn, fang thing, up to gods and whatever. Pretty much, if it's supernatural, it falls into this category of yokai or other.
What about the term Ayakashi?
Ayakashi actually falls under that too. It just is another name for it.
Yeah.
So, Oni.
I actually can't see that.
Oh, that, well,
Yeah.
come over
Make
here.
her- yeah, make
That'd
her-
be killed again. Oh.
Sorry, guys.
Yeah, why don't you
Okay.
Let's see.
All right, there we go. Why don't you just
Switch.
go on over?
Switch.
Sorry, we were expecting a little bit longer cord.
Okay. Oni, we are all fairly familiar with the term, with the image of Oni. They are the big ugly demons with the horn and the leopard skin. However, what people don't usually know is that there's actually two types of Oni. There's the Hell Oni and the Earthly Oni. There are actually two very specific different types. The most famous Oni of them all is Doji. He's actually the most evil of the evil yokai in Japan. When you're thinking of the absolute biggest bad, it is going to be Shuten. There are other two biggest bads. They are Tamamo no Mei and who was actually the other one?
Yamato no Orochi.
Yamato no Orochi.
Somebody
Yeah.
brought up already.
Okay. And Doji is an earthly one. Earthly Oni are born on Earth. They are born from human souls who are so full of sin, they come back to Earth as yokai to terrorize the living. Hell Oni are the opposite. They get reborn in hell to terrorize the dead. The dead that are deserving of punishment and need that punishment in order to spend up their karma and purify their sins.
We'll come back to this idea. The idea here being that once you expiate your sin, once you've paid for your sin, you come back, you're reincarnated. You don't go to heaven. You pay for your sin, you come back. So that's why we need the punishment to get rid of it.
Yeah. Like the only difference between the two is that the earthly Oni, like Doji, are so evil they actually come back to Earth to terrorize the living.
One specifically targets the living, the other specifically targets the dead.
The Yama doesn't want the earthly Oni.
No, we
They're that bad. The Yama just says, nope.
Yama being the judge of hell.
Okay.
It's just the earthly Oni.
Kasha, how many of you are familiar with Nikomata? Or
Nakamata,
Bakaneko?
yeah. Bakaneko or
The
Nakamata
two-tailed
demons.
tap cats or the one-tailed cats, the ones that can walk on their hind legs, talk,
Can you
summon
imagine?
ghostly fireballs, terrorize humans, light their tails on fire and set towns on fire on accident.
It's them.
Yeah. Kasha are the stepped up version of them. They are cat demons. And they, specifically, they are cat demons who reside in hell. They come back, they tend to stalk around funerals and steal the bodies during the funeral.
If you're familiar with Toho, this is where Orin comes from, of course.
Or in Kayambia.
I know I saw one come in here. So hello.
It's fine.
And then I lost my slide.
Kasha and then Yaksha.
Yaksha and Raksha. Yaksha and Raksha are, yeah.
Okay, Yaksha and Raksha are essentially, they're Hindu versions of certain demons. They're specifically fighting demons. They're Hindu equivalents, and they kind of run between good and evil. They pretty much just live for the fight. So you really can't classify that in the duality, as we've mentioned, between good and evil. They just want to fight things. They can make your life a living hell, or if you like a challenge, you can fight them.
Right, three columns.
Do what?
Okay.
Oni as a general family of yokai, when they're seen in virtually any series, because they're so well known, they tend to be the mooks that you see in games. If you have a generic enemy that you need to fight, it's probably going to be an Oni, or some variation of Oni. The imps,
The goblins.
the goblins, the ogres, those are all the same category.
Yep.
Tsuchigumo and Jurigumo are actually related to Oni.
These are the giant spiders.
Giant spiders, yes, or as the horse spider, as the Jurogomo is mentioned as.
There are actually a whole lot of yokai who are actually related to Oni. These ones are just two particular ones. Because of Japan's how they classified yokai in the early days, Tsuchigumo are so related so far back in their
Mythos?
in their mythos. They actually fall underneath the Oni term and fall underneath Oni blanket category terms, and are often found in their myths and usually associated as underlings.
So essentially what we're to summarize is Oni is one big general category. Then you have Tsuchigumo as one subspecies. You have Kasha as another one that kind of relates to it. And then you have the Raksha and the Yaksha as another one. So think of it as kind of a tree. You have the Oni, and then it branches off into these different subspecies.
One of the big things to be aware of with Oni, and this will become very important on the next slide, is that for the most part, they're honest. Outside of Shogun Doji, who is very evil,
There's a reason why.
they're very honest. Oni are very honest. You can take them at the word. We all know Suika, or who's the other one? Yugi from Toho, much the same way. Or, argument I would make here, Disgaea. Now, we all see Disgaea, and I'm sure most of us coming from a Western cultural tradition, those who come from Western cultural tradition, we see the angel Flan, and we see the demon lord Laharl, and Etna, and all of these others. And on the surface, it says, hey, this is a parody of Judeo-Christian, the Kabbalah, the Ars Godia, all of the traditional demons. Yeah, in their looks they are, but look at how they behave. Your Western demons are very dishonest. You can't trust them any further than you can throw them. Oni you can, but let's think about this. Does Laharl ever lie? No.
Yeah, he never did.
He never tells a lie, as far as I can tell, except when he is pulling that one trick. There's that one trick early in the game, but other than that, no, he's telling the truth the whole way down. Etna's a little more
Morally gray.
yeah, a little more morally gray, but your demon lords, they don't need to lie. They don't want to lie. It doesn't help them, so they don't do it. Just like Oni. They respect power, just like the Oni do.
Pretty much, if you can beat them and fair and square too, this is where the whole respect comes in, they will respect you as an equal, and they will either let you go and let you live, or you can parley with them if you want something off of them.
And of course there's many overlords, just like there's many Oni. Many hells, many oni, many overlords. And then we get to the Prinnies. So your Prinnies, if you remember from Disgaea, the Prinnies, they're cute little penguins. Then you find out, well, yeah, they're the souls. They're the souls of humans trying to be reborn.
Is there symbolism for when you throw them and they explode?
I was about to say yes. These are
Okay.
these are sinners that are trying to work off their sins so they can come back to the real world. They're coming back to be reborn, not to get to heaven. If this were drawing on Judeo-Christian mythology, it would be they're trying to get to heaven. No, they're just trying to be reborn, and then you horrible person, use them as explosives.
Question on the back right there.
Yeah, so regular person hell, is that Jigoku or is that something else?
That is
That is one of them.
It's
One of
them.
many.
We're actually gonna,
many.
we're actually going to touch upon this
Yes.
too. Eastern mythology has many layers of hell. It's not like us Westerners where we have just hell. Even though we have the 9 circles as mentioned in Dante's Inferno, that is still classified as that one specific hell. No, Eastern mythology has several different hells for several different beings. As I've mentioned, Yomi, there's Jigoku as well, and it just goes from there. You also got the citizens of Yomi and Makai.
Segukyo and Segumon, otherwise known as the Oxhead Guardians, they are Oxhead and Horseface, often seen in various media.
They
Not
tend,
just anime, not just the games.
they tend to be kind of minor, but you'll notice especially in older games, and one that's going to come up again and again, Final Fantasy Legends series. There's 3 that were on the Game Boy. Drew very heavily on these. The Oxheads were there. Baroque. Another Atlas game that was a roguelike, and then Ib, I believe, had something.
And specifically also in Megami Tensei, in specifically Raido Kuzunoha and versus the Soulless Army, and in Raido Kuzunoha, the second Raido game, you actually get them. They're actually a very minor subplot, but they're actually good demons that you can recruit.
Another creature you will often see in anything related to Buddhist hells are the Hell Wheels, the Wanyu and the Kawadagaruma. They are a male and female version of each other. They are essentially like Oni in that they are reincarnated spirits who come back to plague the living. However, instead of just being there on the surface tormenting them to plague the living, they are kind of like Kasha in where they actually steal people and drag them away to hell.
A lot of times when you see the fiery wheels, this is what they're referring to, not so much throne. And again, central Buddhist symbol, it represents reincarnation. And a lot of these ideas, these particular citizens that show up in older games. In newer games, part of it is a lot of the series have had their own established mythology. Now you tend to see the same games, or the same enemies in Final Fantasy after Final Fantasy, in Zelda after Zelda. But in your older series, when they're first establishing their mythology, they tended to draw on their own ideas. So wheels, the oxes, and so forth.
You had a question?
I didn't know if he was going to bring up in Okami, they have the wheels as enemies.
Yes,
Yes,
they do.
we do too, in Okami.
The citizens of Yomi are usually never actually born as a spontaneous creature from hell. They're almost always a human soul who is turned into the creature to spend up karma by using their deeds to punish humans to spend up their previously bad karma. Sometimes it's usually a human transformation, sometimes it's done by force or maliciousness, sometimes it's on purpose, other times it's usually not. They are more cruel than Western demons. As I said, they're usually here to torment us for either living dead for some reason or another. That is their purpose in life. They are here to
Give us hell.
or a living hell.
So even though they're cruel, they are honest. I think we mentioned this before. You want to ally with them, and you can take their word. Whereas Western demons, forget it. This is really big in the Megaten franchise.
You're negotiating with demons to become your allies.
And this has been a plot point in quite a few games. Again, in the Saga series, I'm pretty sure it was in Okami and elsewhere. Supernatural phenomena being caused more by yokai than they were by naturals. I do recall one, Final Fantasy Legend 2 had an entire world of, well, is it a yokai or is it actually a natural phenomenon? 3 or 4 times over the course of the same world. You're forced to figure this out. And it's about a 50-50 split. Some of them are natural. Some of them, however, there is in fact a god of the mountains who is sitting up there making a lot of noise.
Because the Oni represent supernatural phenomena, even though they are so destructive and detrimental to humanity, they're also feared and respected because of this, and a lot of them are actually regarded and worshipped as gods in the Japanese culture. Specifically, I know of 2 of them. They are the storm gods. I don't remember their names offhand, but because of their sheer destructiveness, but their sheer destructiveness means they could wipe out entire towns if they're angry enough. But the rains that come down with their storms also give life. So it's very much a two-way street.
Death and rebirth. I got this. All right.
So this is the next topic.
So, again, reincarnation. You come back. Now, obviously, we're not talking about, oops, my hit points fell to 0, and you're going to use a phoenix down on me. That's not what we mean by death and rebirth. We mean, oops, your head is somewhere else, you are in the ground, dead. Relates to karma. This idea of, your good deeds add up, your bad deeds add up, and you have to work off your sins in the hells that we talked about, each one in its own, before you can come back. And there isn't a free pass. You can't buy an indulgence in the Japanese mythology. You come back, whereas in Christian mythology, you work off your sin in purgatory instead of hell, and you don't come back. You're assumed to move on to heaven. Cheating, you're not supposed to cheat. If you do it, it's frowned upon. The gods can punish it, the Yama can punish it, but it is possible, and if you can convince the Yamas that you were doing a greater good, sometimes they'll let it slide. So this relates to the wheels from before, and it's much the reason they're so important, that wheel. You go around and around and around until you find your ACen.
So to kind of give a game example of what we mean by the reincarnation and working off your sin, the world ends with you. The very plot point of this game is these are dead souls in Tokyo. They are expected to survive a week of trials in order to come back to life. And they also have that little, I think it was like, what was it? Yeah, no, it was like a payment they also have to do. They have to give up something, and it can either go from your memories, your identity, or something else entirely. It is specific to you. You will get that back if you survive your trials at the end of the game. That is, and this entire phenomena is called the Rebirth game. The souls of the dead, as we said, they're called players here. They go through the week of trials of survival. They have these monsters, pretty much they call noise. They can act as yokai. They're essentially this game's version of yokai and monsters. They are out to kill them. And if they get killed, they just get lost into the ether. They've lost their chance of coming back for good. And you also have the characters called the Reapers. We have 2 examples up there. They're your generic mooks. They actually do not attack you. But there are some Reapers that actively hunt the players during the week. This actually starts around their last day. That is their ultimate last trial that they have to survive. Otherwise, they just send these enemies out at you so they can make your life a living hell. And as we said, other Reapers don't hunt them, but they put up obstacles for players to pass. You have invisible walls in this game, and you're expected to clear a certain trial. And this game's also very fashion conscious, so you have to either, wear certain clothes, or you have to beat a certain amount of monsters in order to pass this trial. And then you move on.
Get through.
And at the end of the week, as I mentioned, you get brought back to life. It is unknown currently, just because the ending is also very vague about it, that if you get reincarnated, your memory, your actual sense of identity comes back, because it seems throughout this week, nobody knows you exist. You simply have disappeared from the world, and then you just kind of come back, and it seems like things are going back to normal. It's pretty much like a giant pause button. Throughout the week, nobody knows you're there. It's like as if you don't even exist. And then when you come back to life, it's as if nothing has ever changed, or nothing has ever happened, and you have never died.
So, on the other hand, we have the Saga series. Now, show of hands, is anybody here familiar with any of the games in that series at all? A couple. Okay.
Well, you told me a lot about it.
Yes. I like this series. But I'm going to point out, this is a series with permanence. This is not a series where, oops, I fell to the ground dead, use a phoenix down and come back. No. If a character dies in battle, that's it. They're gone. Better go find somebody else. But Unlimited Saga, which is not a game I recommend, but hey, it's there. Their whole world is built on this reincarnation cycle. You die, your soul goes to hell, you pay off your sins, you come back. This cycle is broken, and the world itself, over the course of each of the character scenarios, pushes those characters to fix the problem, and it's that something's gotten in the way. There's basically a blockage in the soul drain, as it were. Saga 2, this is where I'm talking about where sometimes the Japanese designers would use Western mythology and then put their own stamp on it. Odin sends you back because you're not done cleaning up your mess yet. He says, all right, I'll revive you, but in exchange you have to prove that you were worthy of it when you fight me. If you're good enough to get through the game without a party kill, he's going to wipe the floor with you when you fight him, because he doesn't see any need to hold back, just like the Oni are going to fight fair. On the other hand, Romancing Saga 2, the entire series, you are one soul. You play as one of these souls, and you reincarnate down this royal tree's family line over a couple thousand years, over and over again, trying to resolve the mess that somebody else created, but you have to go out, and then you come back a couple hundred years later. You only play through the living, but it's still there. And then Minstrel Song. How important is the fact that we need souls to come back instead of being ejected from the cycle? Well, of our three gods of evil, two quit and decided that they weren't going to play anymore, that they weren't going to be evil anymore, because the third one decided he was going to break the cycle, that human souls shouldn't come back, that we're going to get rid of them, it's a world of monsters, humans don't deserve to come back. So Death says, no, I'm done. You made this thing, you're stepping on my ground, you're stepping on the fact that souls are supposed to come back, I'm not working with you, and Shira leaves thereafter for the same reason. Death will allow you to bypass it, but you've got to pay your own life. He'll take it for a price. He'll let you bypass the reincarnation cycle for a price, but it's a bargain, just like it is with the Oni, and just like it can be with the Youngs. Unless it's a character who cheated. If you cheat, forget it, you're not coming back.
If you've noticed, gods do not like to be cheated out of their own playing field. They will play unfair. Alright, as I've mentioned, this is also where I will touch upon the Amaterasu, or Amaterasu's legend. So, to reference back to the Izanagi myth, just to introduce her, she was born when Izanagi was cleansing himself out of Yomi's impurities. So, once again, she was born out of his wondrous eyes. Now, the thing about Amaterasu and why she's so specifically important is that the Japanese Imperial line, the emperor themselves and his family, directly claim inheritance and descendants from this goddess, Amaterasu. So it's pretty much, you know how in European they assume they're divine rulers. That is what the Japanese Imperial line is essentially saying. They are descendants of this goddess. And look, I'm going to tell you her most well-known story. Susanoo and her have a rivalry and a contest, essentially saying, over who can create the most gods. Now, their major gods, they can essentially create demigods. And this is your god's version of sibling rivalry here. Short story, essentially, Amaterasu won, but in Susanoo's feat of fury, he decided to destroy her rice fields and kill one of her attendants. Now, this death was so traumatizing because he essentially flayed her and put her upon her bed. Just to show off, I hate you. You beat me in, I'm going to throw a temper tantrum about it. And out of grief and fury, she decides to hide herself in a cave for 3 days, encompassing the world in total darkness. You will see this myth also with Noah's Ark, or in other legends in the Bible, 3 days of darkness. So, and after much persuasion, what essentially happens, in order to coax Amaterasu out of her cave, all of the gods have gathered outside of the cave, and all of them try different methods to coax her out. Persuasion, you know, bribes, bantering, stuff like that. The one thing that brings her out was one of the gods, Kushinada. She is pretty much the goddess of combs, essentially. She's a little minor goddess, but she starts dancing and starts entertaining everyone, and everyone starts having a good time. They're laughing, they're singing, they're clapping. Amaterasu herself kind of gets a bit curious about what's the ruckus kind of going on, so she takes a peek outside of her cave. And that's when she essentially just, saw the party going on. She decided to join in, and that's when she finally thought, okay, being outside is not so bad. So it's kind of like how a kid kind of gets coaxed out of, their temper tantrum. She saw something fun was happening and she wanted in. And she did, after all, make amends with Susano. However, this is also the very same incident that got him kicked out of heaven, and he's going to live in the mortal world. That is a different legend, though. So another thing that kind of goes with Amaterasu is that she has attendants, other attendants. They're called messenger crows, or the Yatagarasu. In Toho, we have one such particular character, Utsuho Ryuji. But in other games, you just see them mostly as minor enemies, or they're not really too terribly important. Shin Megami Tensei, they're enemy you can recruit and also fight. You'll probably see murders of crows also kind of just as an important plot point some now and then, or as a character motif. Henry from Fire Emblem as well.
Note that crows and ravens in Japanese mythology tend to be treated the same. It's a matter of what your translator felt like doing in a game at a particular time, what they're going to call them. But when you see crows, when you see ravens, for the most part, we see them, they're seen as the
messengers, yes.
Yes, but they are messengers. Game of Thrones uses that, but I don't think Martin was really reading through Japanese mythology when he wrote it.
And just to kind of go back.
Oh, go back.
Just to kind of give a Western example, what would be for crows for us? You have Odin's three-legged crows, Hugin and Munin, I believe they're called.
Yes.
Yes. And once again, they're more seen as the attendants to Odin, to the god, and I believe also as a symbol of either death or as a messenger. So, just to give like a Western example. So Amaterasu's appearances in game, her one major one, and the one that the entire game is made after, Okami. The game is about her, and the sequel is actually about her son, her incarnation. We're mostly focusing about the first game. And another appearance that she shows up in is, once again, Shin Megami Tensei. She is the highest of the Megami class, which is a class that mostly specializes in healing and in magic. Megami, once again, means goddess. Surprisingly, she hasn't really played her own major role in any of the games. In Persona 4, and I think Golden, where you have your personas evolve into their next form, Yukiko gets it. The reason Yukiko kind of gets it is because she is seen as Japan's idol woman. It's also called the Nagashiko Yamato. So she's pretty much the personified version of what Japan wants in a lady. That's why she gets Amaterasu as Japan's own patron goddess.
Yeah.
And the Yatagarasu, her messenger, also, as I said, shows up now and then in other games. Mostly you're going to see them as guides or something like that, not so much a major leading role. You're going to see them mostly as like a taskmaster. The Double Summoner series, they show up in there. So.
I believe it was Inudo Way of the Ninja. It was an old NES cart, used ravens to give you your missions as well. Question?
Well, I know I had two questions, and you're probably going to cover this, and I'm just jumping the gun again, but...
It's okay.
Why is it that Amaterasu is a wolf in Okami? And another question as to... I was doing research, and I thought Amaterasu only had a grandson, not a son, and his name is Niniji no Mikoto?
Yes, that is actually true. The reason why she took on the form of a wolf, I believe, is a symbolic thing, too. The Honshu wolf is extinct in Japan, and it's one of their pride wolves, too. So it's a very symbolic thing, too. It also represents kind of like the whole death and rebirth. She is white. We're going to touch upon this color scheme as well, red and white, next. It symbolizes death and rebirth. So that's the reason she kind of chose that kind of coloring. As you also noticed, she was Shiranui in Okami, which was her previous incarnation. She kind of reincarnated from that.
She picked that, so basically she picked that wolf because that particular wolf, even though it's still extinct, is sort of an animal that symbolizes Yamato, that symbolizes Japan as a whole. Now, unless there's any questions, I'd like to move along.
Well, the whole Ninji at the end of something.
That's pretty much just for Okami, the sequel. They just kind of took that as a creative liberty. They knew Amaterasu has that grandson. That's what they made Shibitarasu kind of into. It's creative liberties on the developer's part, even though that game was not made by Clover. It was made by a completely different company. They once again took the legend and they kind of put their own spin on it. But once again, like you said, Amaterasu has a grandson, and this is where the Japanese Imperial line kind of claimed their descendants from. So,
yeah. Moving along. Good guys. Good color is usually what? No, don't move on. Good color in, when we think of good, first place is blue, right? Normally? Well, that's what I thought too. And I started doing some looking around. Red versus blue. Now, I always thought the good guys wore blue because that's what we usually are told. Well, we do in Fire Emblem at least. But because of Amaterasu, and you were asking about the red-white, she passes these colors down. Any depiction of her that you see is usually red, white, and gold. Your heroic and regal colors for Japan are red, white, and gold. Compared to the east or to the west, blue, purple, sometimes some red or gold. But blue and purple are huge for the royal colors. A lot of that, I think, over here had to do with how expensive dye was. But there is that. So that's why over here, you know, we say the good guys are blue. When they talk about friendly fire, it's blue on blue, not red on red. Reds are hostiles, right? So, and again, this is why Miko, like Reimu, wear red and white. We'll talk more about them in a bit. Kings, queens, other rulers in JRPGs, they're not usually wearing purple and red. They're usually wearing white and gold, the same as the Emperor. So for our good guys, fire, red mage, white mage, red and white. Final Fantasy II, Firion and Maria. Now, Maria's the girl on the third line. Firion just uses the fighter's sprite, but even his concept art, red, white. Hilda and Gordon were the only royalty left in Final Fantasy II. If you want a depressing Final Fantasy game, play Final Fantasy II. They're the only ones left. White, gold. The Red Wings, Final Fantasy IV, kind of represents Japan's darker side there. It's an aggressive, nationalistic, expansionistic force. They're military, very red. Garnet, which is in disguise as a white mage, red-white.
once again, Amaterasu.
You mentioned Amaterasu. Now, Advance Wars. How many people here are familiar with Advance Wars? Oh, goodly number.
Yes.
Main nation, of course, is, we know it as Orange Star, but when it was originally released in Japan, it was Red Star. They changed it over here to Orange Star because, you know, filthy commies. Filthy commies. We don't want red stars here in the US, so it's Orange Star. But why are the good guys wearing red? Why is the evil force blue? Why is Blue Moon in the first Advance Wars game the bad guys for most of the game? And even in Days of Ruin, the nation that Will, your main character, is from, Rubinel, Lazuria as the bad guys, not real subtle their intelligence systems. What I find funny about that is Advance Wars Fire Emblem, same company. Fire Emblem, all your heroes except for Makai, blue hair, blue cloak, blue, over and over again.
Even Erika, she is technically wearing red, but she has blue hair, so she is considered all that.
Yep.
You have the question?
No, I was going to say, that would explain why recently Akira Toriyama mentioned the names of the two androids, 17 and 18. Their names is Lapis and Lazul, which is blue.
There you go. There you go.
Ha,
See, now you're kind of just getting some examples up here. It's like, oh.
Pokeballs and Ash's hat, they're sealing items. So that's why they're red and white. That's why that color scheme and not blue, as you would expect from the good guys. Other examples, Reimu.
I have PC-98 Reimu, which is an older version, but yes, you have Reimu Hakurei from Toho Project. Your protagonist, she is a Miko. She exterminates yokai. She has a red and white color scheme. And compared to, and later on, there's another shrine maiden that shows up, which is Sanae Kochiya. She is an outsider, she's an immigrant. She wears blue and white.
Good guys and bad guys.
Contact Collection, Ship Girls. We have the Congo-class battleships. They are seen in Shrine Maiden attires, once again, mostly red and white. Why? Because this game is mostly kind of based on the Japanese Imperial Navy, and they are seen as the good guys fighting the Abyssals, which has this negative connotation of it being the American Army, or the American Navy. And other ship classes that you see that have this similar color scheme, the Yamato class, Yamato herself and Musashi. You also have the Fuso class battleships, the Issei, the Issei class battleships and the Yamashiro class battleships. These are all very Shrine Maiden attire. So they're also your primary fighters. You also see this with their one German ship, Bismarck. She has more of a beige color scheme, she also has red and white.
But she's wearing her
German outfit.
So your premier fighters, your battleships, which were at the start of World War II thought to be the kings of the seas, red, white, color of power. Other games that have used this, Art the Lag Collection, very underrated, very not well-known RPG series, worth a go. Less white here, but almost all of your pro tags, red, red, red. If the guy's got a red scarf, he's joining you. Like, red scarf and red hair, yeah, he's a party member. He's dressed in red, yeah, she's a party member. She's a party member. Why? They're wearing red. The good guys wear red. Most of your bad guys are wearing blue. It's a conscious choice, I'm pretty sure. Suikoden, Tyr McDole, giant red tabard. He's your main character, he's your leader, briefly the leader of the Republic. The Emperor on the other side, your Royal Emperor Barbarossa, red beard, dressed all in red. So again, regal colors, red. They continued this, I'll come back to Suikoden 2 in a moment, but in Suikoden 5 and Suikoden 3, very strong red motif in your protagonists. Not so much of the blue. So Suikoden 2, the reason I said I'd come back to this, so we've talked about red and blue. We've got our three main characters up here, Ryan, Nanami, and Joey. One ends up leading your army. The other one ends up leading the opposing army and does some pretty horrible things in the process. This is a game that will make you cry. Given the pattern that I've already pointed out, that overwhelming, or at least not overwhelmingly, but a goodly number of your protags tend to be red, 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 instead of the blue, no real points for guessing which one of these three up here is your protagonist.
And which one betrays you?
Yes. Knife in the back. He also ends up leading the new country in the normal ending, which is not actually all that good of an ending.
To kind of show this also red and white screen, I'm bringing up two indie games, Yomi and Ib. It's okay. Ib, in her titular game, she is the protagonist, and while the main characters also have that blue and green kind of color scheme, she is the one who, her choices affect the ending of the game. The blue character, surprisingly not a bad guy, he is actually your ally, so it's a bit of a subversion there. And the one who's your enemy is actually going to be the one in green. As for Yumeniki, Madotsuki, usually in red, you are, in this game, very vague game, but the popular consensus of a summary for it would be this girl is having really surreal dreams, and you play through them. A lot of it is vague. A lot of it is very vague connotations. You have monsters popping up here, you have a monster chasing her as well. She has a dream about being a witch. All of these just make no sense. You're picking up kind of like little random items here and there. And all of a sudden, when you finish all these endings, she goes out to the balcony and she jumps off and kills herself. That is the ending of the game. Now, the most popular speculated theory of this game, because there is no canonical explanation for it, is these dreams are actually her subconsciousness. And they're all kind of bridled up to bring a message. All of the monsters in these games are people that she's actually known. There's a guy who has kind of like an arm hanging around from his head. People are saying that's probably like a teacher or a parental figure of her. And she's known him. There's also another one, there's a girl there. She looks like she has like wounds on her. It's kind of speculated that she's killed her. It's a very vague game. I would kind of recommend kind of playing it so you can draw your own conclusions to it.
What would you think, Uboa-chan?
Uboa could probably be her own guild chasing her around, because it chases you around the entire game, Uboa, and you know, if you get caught by it, you know, more or less kind of a game over, I think. It's been a while since I played it, but it could, that's typically kind of considered as your own subconscious or your own guild trying to get to you. And one last example.
One last example, and this is one who's kind of both red and blue, but when we first ran into him, way back in, 84, 83, when we first saw him, he was a big red blob. Say hi to Mario.
Thank you. So the next topic.
3 Imperial treasures. These are items that show up in your RPGs all the time. And also, the motif of them shows up elsewhere. We have the 3 treasures. The Magatama. It's a comma-shaped gem, and you see this now. Anybody can think of any examples here where you've seen gems like that?
Ace Attorney.
Ace Attorney, right
yes.
on the front. Anybody else?
Anything else? Anyone else? Right in the back.
In the green?
Green?
I think that was you. Green?
Me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Amaterasu's weapons in Okami?
Yes.
Amaterasu's weapons in Okami?
Do you have one, sir?
Sharingan.
What?
Sharingan.
Yes.
Sharingan, yes, the Sharingan. Technically again, yes.
Would Shenmue count?
Yes, yes. All the way in the back, right there, standing up.
Would the Mitama demons from Shin Megami Tensei?
Absolutely, yes. And the Magatama that you swallow up as well as the Demi-Fiend in 3.
In the anime Ikitosen, every character has one.
Okay.
Exactly,
Their
yes.
importance is based on the color.
Okay.
Yes, actually, yes.
They're associated with Hachiman.
Which is the symbol of war, actually. He is a god of war.
So you got the 4 souls, somebody mentioned the Mitama from Megaten, there you go. That's why they look that way. Rarely is it shown as an orb. In fact, if you just see the orb by itself, they're actually referring to the Imperial Orb of Charlemagne or the Holy Hand Grenade of Antioch. So it's not really an orb, it's what's called a Kamae, but yes, Ace Attorney. The Kusanagi, aka it's the sword, it's the second one. We don't actually know if this one still exists. The last time it was supposedly brought out was for the current emperor's ascension to the throne. It was completely covered at the time, and the monks at the temple that hold it will not allow anyone to see it.
Not even researchers.
No.
Yes.
Sometimes you'll also see this name in RPGs, the Ameno Murakamo, or the Heaven's Cloud.
I thought it was like the battle of the Enki or whatever it was, that it was thrown into the Sea of Japan.
That is, I do remember reading that story, and then the story is that it washed up again, or it was found again. They don't know, or rather, they're not saying. Nobody's saying.
Which I didn't even hear that it was supposedly in possession of
Yeah.
Supposedly, yes.
Supposedly, yes. So when you see the Murakumo or the Kusanagi, they may or may not be the same blade. Obviously, you're talking about thousands of years of legends at this point. Some of them differ. Some say that they're the same weapon. Others say that that the Kusanagi was used to kill, or I'm sorry, the Murakumo was used to kill Yamato and Orochi, and then the Kusanagi was pulled from its tail. And then the third one, the Kagami, or the Mizukugami, is the mirror, and it's almost always rendered as a shield. And we actually talked about most of these, some of these examples already. Saga Frontier 1, the Tomb of the Ancient King, has these, all 3, and in fact you turn in the Murakumo to have it become the Kusanagi, if you can kill the previous emperor. Kane.
Toho's Kei Kamishara. She has the 3 historical artifacts with her as her theme as spell cards, and her thing is Japanese history. So she is going to have reference to these, as well as mentioned in the print works. Marisa Kirisame apparently has this sword.
And tossed it on her junk pile. And back.
There was a movie from Korea, actually, that was on Netflix called Uchi, and in the movie, the main character is searching for the bronze sword and a mirror, and it wasn't the gem, but I just thought that was interesting as well, because it's a Korean perspective rather than a Japanese perspective.
And there's a lot of cultural cross-pollination between the two, so that does not surprise me. You are correct, that is very likely a reference between the two.
This is a rather obscure one, but in the anime Strawberry Eggs, you'll see in the first episode one of the tenants in this place that the main character lives in. Apparently, like, the landlady is trying to get everyone to pay rent. The one guy comes out, brings out a huge mirror, and like has the light reflecting in her eyes to blind her. And it's kind of a running joke that he's always having that mirror with him. So I'm guessing that is a kind of defense as a shield. So
Yep.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If the mirror is more or less used as a shield, you can more likely assume it's going to be as a reference to the Kagami, the Holy Imperial Treasure, even in the most nonsensical of ways like that.
We talked about these two already, the Magatama giving you power, the Fays, all the Fays carrying around a Kamae's necklace. That's what gives them their ability to commune with the spirits. Other examples, anytime you see the common-shaped gem. The Murakumo, common RPG weapons. Now, the Kusanagi literally means grass cutter sword. Now, this was funny because I know that it made me remember something about a sword cutting grass. If you go onto Google and put in grass cutting sword, you're going to get a bunch of lawnmower companies. They're all in Japan.
Yes.
But here's the thing. Can you actually cut grass with a regular sword, swinging it the way that, I don't know, Link does? Have you ever tried that? It doesn't work. A sword is a very poor implement. But Why give Link that power? Why can he mow the lawn with a sword? Because he's a god. Kami.
He also gets the mirror shield, right?
Yes, he does.
He does, actually.
Yes, he does in several games.
We have...
Thank you.
I was just saying, like, another instance where it's used, like, the KOF games are, like, three main, like, family, like, characters. Like, the main character, Kyo Kusanagi, is, like, one of the first arcs is where Uppo gets, like, the resurrection of Orochi.
Cool.
And, like, at some point, Makai comes into that. Like, it's
So
a lot of, I know all the terms are from around and they're all like part of family, but I mean, the main character's last name is Kusanagi.
Ooh, and he's using at least 2 of the treasures you said?
He's not using the treasures, but there's another family that uses the mirror.
Oh. Alrighty.
And they all eventually come together to seal Orochi before.
Yeah, they were definitely going, yeah, we're going to use this directly. And there's nothing, and I'm not judging you, there is nothing wrong with a game designer using their cultural background. Where it gets funny is when you have them kind of cross over. We'll hopefully get to that event.
Alright. Kami are the Japanese gods. They're what the Japanese refer to as gods. They are in their entirety spirits. That is all they are. They are your supernatural spirits. Okay. The Japanese religious system is a type of animism, so they will literally worship anything and everything as they believe it has a soul. Most of them are nature-based, and they often have their own shrines or their own artifacts. Those shrines are often blended into the background of wherever they're situated. They want them to blend in. Kami are not good and they are not evil. There is no such thing in their religion. Some Kami can be extremely malevolent, but they're still worshipped anyways, like I mentioned previously. The only difference between a yokai and a kami is that one is worshipped and the other is not. If a yokai starts getting worshipped, it will turn into a kami. Those types of kami are usually considered origami. Harsei Mizuhashi from Toho Project is actually one of these. She is a creature called a Hashihime, and the Hashihime is actually a river god who guards bridges. There are three types of gods, or 3 types of kami that are normally seen. Like any kami will be categorized under one of these 3 spirits. You have the Amatsu kami. They are your heavenly gods like Amaterasu and Tsukuyomi and Susanoo. The earthly gods, they are your gods of the earth. They are your nature spirits of trees, animals, plants, and whatever else have you. And then you have the other myriads of gods.
Couple of examples of these kami that have shown up in video games. Raito 2, the antagonist god is a nature god, a nativist god. Shinano, only worshipped in one very small region. Suikoden uses the true runes that amplify particular elements of the world. Fire, water, bestiality, beast. Yeah, that came out wrong. Try it again. So fire, water, being enraged, peacefulness, conquering, rulership, leadership, all of these are embodied in the true runes.
Is bestiality going to be in the new Avatar series?
No, it's not. Just to also mention about these gods that we mentioned, there's also in Toho Project, Suwako Moria, she is an indigenous god.
Note that she is an actual indigenous god in Japan. The Suwa Shrine apparently got many more visitors after Mountain of Faith came out than before.
Wonder why.
They maybe gave Zoom some kickbacks.
Oh, it's entirely possible. No, I don't know. And actually bringing back Suikoden again, for those who have played Suikoden 2, recall that when you leave Kiaro at the beginning of the game, Nanami makes you go back and pray to your grandfather before you leave. And I'm not sure if this has happened in other games, but that was a moment that struck me as, okay, so we're praying to our grandfather, and then when we started talking about the ancestor worship, there it is. All right. Shrines.
there are many types of shrines in Japan. There are many roadside ones that like you can find them on virtually any street corner or on mountain paths. They are dedicated to these kami that they worship. Most of these little shrines are specific to the kami in that area. They are not usually branch shrines unless they are specifically referred to as such. The larger shrines usually have a resident kami and have their own mikos and priests and other shamans that go with them.
Examples in games. We see a lot of shrines used as save points in games.
Okami in particular. You have a roadside shrine as your save point.
Yep. The Journeyman's Crystal in Suikoden. The Records of Fate in Chrono Cross. You pray to them both to get guidance.
If you want to get really technical, the terminals in Shin Megami Tensei also can act like this.
The Raito games. You have very small shrines, some of which you can help revitalize. And then here's played Shadow of the Colossus. What do you do when you need to save? You pray at one of those little shrine statue type things that are scattered around this valley. Not that the guy there you really want to be praying to.
As previously mentioned, Hashihime. The only time I've ever seen her actually implemented in a game as a physical character is parsed as Hashi, as like I said, as previously mentioned. It literally translates to Bridge Princess, occasionally Bridge Spirit. She is also occasionally sometimes associated with the Ibaraki myth, and I will go into that. She is a goddess of separation and divorce, and she has in previous times during conflicts of war been a goddess of bridges and separation, whose specific purpose was to keep invaders from crossing over and completely destroying the town that was imploring her for her help.
So essentially, just to kind of clarify this, she is seen as the goddess of bridges in the conceptual sense that it's connecting one thing to another, and the literal sense of the actual crossing over a bridge.
And this may be the source of, hey, this bridge is haunted, it's broken, please fix it so we can go to the next town. The Lufia series uses this over and over again.
Tales of Symphonia has this with the rebuild of Lewin, that giant side quest he put so much money into.
Small question, who here is actually familiar with the myth of Ibaraki Doji? Okay, story time. So, because I completely forgot to mention it back during Shukendoji. Shukendoji has underlings. One of them is Ibaraki Doji. When his band is completely destroyed, Ibaraki is the only one to flee. Ibaraki later comes up again in another myth at a bridge, assaulting that retainer to get her arm back. Many historians are not entirely sure that was Ibaraki Doji actually assaulting the guy. Some people think it was Hashihime. There has been debate. They are not sure.
This legend is also mentioned in the story Monogatari, if you guys want to give it a read, or the Tale of Heike, H-E-I-K-E, if you guys want to give that a read. I actually recommend if you're really into Japanese mythology.
Alright. Shamanism, Miko, and Onmyoji.
So I'm just going to essentially explain what the shamanists do with the gods, what Miko do, and then another kind of people who also worship and deal with supernatural phenomena would be the Onmyoji. Now, shamanism in the traditional Japanese sense, what they are is a form of animalism, where the spirits, the kami, essentially are called upon to be of an influence of the world or to aid a specific person. They can go from, asking just for simple information, simple advice, to actually specific interventions of incidents or of an oncoming phenomenon, or for even outright possession. Sorry. Now, Miko, as we mentioned before, these priestesses, they can either become possessed by the gods and they can become their spokesperson. That is literally their only job. Aside from taking care of the shrine, they are the voice people, they are the advocates for the gods. And summoning and controlling kami is the role of the Miko. Now, as for Onmyoji, these guys are actually more seen as exterminators of yokai or natural phenomena, or court magicians, and I'm going to specify between the two as well. They're also seen more likely as like diviners, astronomers. These two kind of err on the side of both science and magic, as opposed to Mikos, which are more spiritual bound. So, Shamanism and summoning, as we're going to see in some video games. The major aspect of summoning in anything, in video games or in real life concepts, it's about calling a spirit or a deity for help. Amnaji themselves also kind of use this process, but they call upon familiars which are kind of different. Familiars for them are spirits bound to an object meant to serve them, whereas for Mikos and the gods, it's more as an aid. They go back to doing whatever they do after the specific mission is fulfilled. There are several types of summoning as well. Invocation, chanting, dancing, a spell. Anything like that to call upon the spirit. You see this in video games like the Tales of series, Kingdom Hearts series, the Final Fantasy series, MMO classes. When you have a summoner, you are using some sort of invocation as a spell. You're either using probably a dance or just some kind of ritual to call upon the gods to this world. You also kind of have this as in Toho Project in just one specific instance in the written works. I'll do this, yeah. Also, another way just to kind of get the kami to join you, several of them actually want you to beat them in order for them to, in order for you to prove your worth. Something, you know, they kind of get called upon this world as saying, wait, I'm a god. Why should I listen to you, puny human, when I can literally destroy you with the touch of my finger? So they're asking you to prove yourself to them, and then after you beat them in some sort of contest, usually a battle in games, they'll join your side. Now you're going to see this in many other games as well. Altair Iris, Bravely Default, and sometimes again in some Final Fantasy series. Tales of series as well, specifically Symphonia. I want to say. The Golden Sun series, I believe you do with Jin, and you also do this a lot in the Shin Megami Tensei series.
There's a lot of demons who will not join you until you prove yourself to them, and then you can summon them.
Question out and back.
All of this is striking me, reminding me very much so of Kamen Rider, and very much so in Kamen Rider Kiba, where it's split between the 1980s and the current generation. In the 1980s, the Kamen Rider of the time defeated 3 monsters and was then gave the right to call upon them to his son, who then basically summons them, reminding them very much of the Kamiyoji, summoning a familiar, in order to use their power to defeat their enemies. While in Kamen Rider 10-0, the main character strikes me very much as a Miko, being possessed by the Kami, or in the case of the show itself, the Yokai, in order to do the process of what an Onmyoji should do.
Yes.
Other ways that you can get them on your side, make a mutual pact. Kami are open to agreements, just like humans are. Kami are quite okay with the game of give and take, so you see this in the older Atelier games, some of the mainline SMT, Silent Sinner and Blue, the Mana series, Seiken Densetsu. You enter into mutual pacts with each of your spirits in order to get them on your side, or you can try to impress them. Bravely Default, oh, you survived my attack, okay, you can summon me. Strange Journey, Devil Survivor, Seiken Densetsu.
Alright, so I'm going to explain what Miko are and what Miko do. So we're going to, let's see. Traditional Miko. Not contemporary Miko as we've seen in this picture. Traditional Miko, once again, use red and white, which is what the divine colors tend to be because they are advocates of the gods. They're used an assortment of tools for divination and exorcism. You see in much of RPG games and in anime, tree branches. They use goheis, which is the stick with the long papers on them. They're seals. They use talismans as well, either like holy relics that they personally themselves have blessed, or prayer beads, rosary beads, something like that, magatama as well.
Yeah, there's Shikamane again.
Yes. So their duties, what they include, they call upon the spirits and God. That is their one most important duty because they are the advocates for them. They also can divine fortunes. They can do exorcisms. They can drive out negative spirits from a home or from an area or from anywhere that is supposedly causing trouble. And they essentially also just maintain the shrine. Other examples of Mikos that you would see is Rao and Kagu from Okami. Kushinada from the Ride of Kuzunoga manga, she is specifically kind of like in gray side because she holds a lot of magnetite, which is food for demons, and she is seen as like a holy being herself. And you also have Kukuru in Arctalad.
And then Now, this is one that struck me as funny. When I first played these games, like, why is this Miko in my Western Castlevania game? Well, Konami put it in there. Unfortunately, we're never going to find out why she's there because Konami, it looks like, has killed the franchise, along with everything else. But hey. Yeah.
We also have Rainbow Makai as well, as an example, as we already mentioned. She is known as the Shrine Maiden of Paradise.
Note that the Toho project is often romanized as Project Shrine Maiden. Those are the two characters making up the game's names.
Right, so Onmyoji, let me tell you about them. In contrast to Mikos, these guys are seen as magicians or advisors in the Imperial Court, specifically in the Imperial Court, than they are in shrines. They are advisors to whatever royalty is there. Your Western equivalent would be Merlin, actually. They are the Merlin. And a lot of them were itinerant, like with monks. Think Gandalf, the Eoite, or Belgarath. So they mix natural science with occultism. Now that means they mix alchemy. They mix metals, kind of esoteric science like that, with actual magic rituals. Their roots lies in very ancient sources, ancient Chinese philosophy, wuxing. Most notably, you're going to see them with the yin-yang symbol, which represents life and death. So, once again, they're also astronomers, and they're also court advisors, but they also make calendars. They specifically specialize in just exterminating yokai and fortune-telling. So, they have the similarities with Mikos that they'll go out, exterminate whatever nuisance is out there, but they're not going to make an income off that. They're mostly just there as an advisor. And in video game series, what we see them mostly as Mia Fey to Phoenix Wright, Raido Kuzunoha as well. Now, who here has played Phantom Brave? That very obscure series that will make you cry. Morona. She's in an Onmyoji who sees the spirits of the dead.
Her whole job is to bind them. Bind them to the real world, at least for a little bit.
Any others? Yoko binds souls to weapons, as Isaac did in 12th century for Dracula. Victor in the Raido Kuzunoha games and also in Soul Hackers. He binds spirits of demons to Raido Kuzunoha sword or to your comp weapon in Soul Hackers. And also where you will see this is Odin's Spear. And now we're going to have just pretty much another topic, which is the Tsufumogami with ghosts and obake. We've mentioned Japanese love their ghost stories. Oh, do they ever.
Any abandoned object. Now, of course, those who have played Toho know about Kogasa, of course. Any abandoned object, anything that outlives its life, anything that's forgotten, can take on a life of its own.
After 100 years.
100 years. Nekomata, of course, is the probably the most famous example. Oh, hey, it's a cat that lived for 100 years, it's got a second tail, now it's immortal, walks on its hind legs, and lies to you. But this is with objects. The Japanese love their ghost stories. This is not the Western, oh, ghosts arise from unfinished business. No. Ghosts arise from all kinds of things. If you're interested in Japanese ghost stories, Laficardo Hearns collected a huge number of these. He changed his name to, I believe, I don't know what his first name was, but he changed his last name to Yakumo. Yes? Say again?
Koizumi Yakumo.
Koizumi Yakumo, yes, there it was. Collected in hundreds of these stories and put them down in the text when he finally settled down in Japan. The karakasa. Not just the umbrellas, but any object that, again, abandoned, forgotten, takes on a life of its own.
As for other examples as well, you know, the ghost houses and Boo that you see in Super Smash Bros. Any other examples? As I mentioned earlier before, Mankoli, sword boys. These are swords that are taken from major Japanese myths or an actual used in combat. You, the player character, if any of you has played any of the Japanese browser games, you, the player character, are the sage that brings them to life. And these swords have already lived past the 100-year frame. These swords are at least 200 years old. And you're off to fight whatever demons are out there plaguing the world.
I'll also point out that zombie stories of things coming to life mindlessly, we've had them for the Japanese have had them for hundreds of years before we started to see them here. Ghost riders, corpse riders, and so forth. Just death is...
As the last major example, Fatal Frame. Everyone knows Fatal Frame. The ghost that you're haunting there and you have to take pictures of.
Sorry, we're seeming to rush through because we are starting to run a little low on time. We took a little longer than we expected at the beginning. But talking equipment, dancing equipment, it's not too similar from dancing equipment. These are your Tsukumogamis. But more importantly, the landscape being alive. Persona Q players, can I see a show of hands? How many of you are in the third labyrinth yet?
Don't talk.
I'm not going to talk about that because I don't want to spoil the fun for you. Enjoy.
This is, yeah.
Yeah, but...
This is the concept that the walls have ears and the doors have eyes.
So, yeah, like this guy.
If you guys remember this guy from Final Fantasy IV, yes.
The trapdoors. Waking up. A lot of times these doors and portals, these very strange doors and portals that maybe talk to you, or maybe are just haunted. Ghost lanterns, little ghost lanterns. It's a very typical thing that you'll see in these RPGs. Ghost houses are all over the place. Many of you, I forget where I was going with that, but that's all right. Kogasa's a Karkarsa, Ben.
Yeah, you want to talk with other examples, just really quickly running through here. Those are the characters of Toho Project and what they're siblings Tsukumogami of. Kogasa, Karakasa, she is an umbrella with one leg. Ben and Yatsuhashi, they're a koto and a shamisen, they're instruments. Raiko, a taiko drum. Persona Q's third dungeon, Romantic Saga. Tales of Destiny's swords. Now, who here has played Tales of Destiny 1? The one that came on over here. Those swords are technically classified as Tsukumogami because they are alive even though they house the souls of the previous heroes that they are considered living swords.
Romance and Saga did the same thing with Gray's Quest, the Demon Brand. It's a sword that's got a soul in it, it came alive because it was left around.
And a popular theory for Kansai Collection is that these girls are housing the souls of the ships. It's very vague concept, but that is a very popular theory as to why they have the traits that they do as ship girls. Yes?
The souls are formed inside, not like taking from someone else's afterlife, and it's not being someone reborn, it's just different.
It can be both. It can be either they were naturally reincarnated as into that object, as Buddhism actually says you don't naturally reincarnate as a person, but maybe as another thing or as an object. Or it could be, as I said before, somebody has deliberately put that soul into that object.
Usually, when we're talking about an obake, we're talking about an obake or a Tsukumogami. It is something where the weapon has come alive after being abandoned.
Or an item or anything, a non-living object.
So our animal yokai, last set, the animal yokai. There's a lot of these, there's a lot of little references. Again, this is where the Japanese, where any game designer, American, Japanese, European, wherever, rates their cultural background for these. And sometimes they show up and you don't really realize it. Minor examples, the Bakeneko and Nekomata, cats. Almost all of these are going to show up as your random enemies. So going through, Tanuki.
Raccoon dogs, Ferris, they're very trickster types. These are you're going to see in Mario, actually.
I remember when I first played Super Mario 3, I was like, what is a Tanuki? What is this Tanuki? It's a raccoon that turns to stone. What?
It is an actual animal also, as well as a little red panda. It's called in Japan. So the next one is
Inugami, dog spirits. Mega 10 has these. The Saga series has these from time to time.
They're very malicious spirits. They are called specifically to torment people and to torture them. They are used as familiars and most likely by Onmyoji. But if they're used by Onmyoji, most likely they're bad news.
Tengu. Mountain and wind spirits, wolves, crows, ravens. Remember I said crows and ravens are often treated the same. These are your high-class yokai. They are teachers. Yoshitsune.
You've heard the legend of Yoshitsune, anyone?
Was taught by Tengu. He was taught swordsmanship by the Tengu because they are that good. And of course they show up in Toho. Saga has them in the very early. In the very early days.
We're going to mention Toho a lot because Toho Project is essentially, let's grab animal yokai, or let's grab Japanese legend and turn them into cute little girls with dresses.
Kitsune, fox spirits, sometimes they're advisors. Kitsune are seen as very wise. A lot of times you'll see fox spirits at the entrance of shrines.
Most notably seen in Persona 4, the little fox spirit, yip yip all you yen. And Raido Kusuno has a very strong Kitsune influence on there too.
Yeah, foxes are everywhere there around the shrines. Toho, Saga again. Kappa, who has played Final Fantasy VI? Remember the imp status ailment and that stupid turtle that came out to explain stuff like rage and dance and magic?
Don't want to remember.
Yeah, well it was called Kappa because the imp status effect was originally Kappa in the Japanese version. They changed it to imp over here because
we don't know what Kappa is.
1995 or 4, that's going to kind of go over people's heads, but that's where it came from. And that's why your equipment absorbs water.
You also have, just very rarely they show up, but you will see sometimes moon rabbits. Rabbits are very much associated with the moon. They are seen pounding mochi, which I don't know if you guys have had, little rice treats with a little kind of paste filled inside of them as well. They're very sweet, they're very good. They're mostly seen in Toho and Okami. They're mostly seen as servants to a god called Lord Daifuku, which is also, I forgot his actual Japanese name, but they're mostly seen as attendants to this one god.
So, conclusions.
We're at the end, finally.
We are at the end. Japan has a huge mythological base to draw upon. It's really a mishmash of the two traditions of Shinto and Buddhism, which at times have been the same, but have also diverged. Designers tend to draw upon both a lot. These creatures, stories, legends, myths, ideas, they find their way into modern video games. It influences design choices, whether or not we're going to have permadeath, whether we're going to let you revive in spite of it, whether we're going to have a ghost house to scare the daylights out of you.
And what enemies are you guys going to be fighting next?
Yes, and especially in the older games. Now, when I was prepping this panel, I found myself going back to playing some of the NES classics and the Game Brick, the original Game Boy classics, and going, oh, that's where that's from, over and over and over again. Where are all these? And I remember playing when I was like 7 and going, what is an O-Ink? What is a Tengu? Now, it's, oh, well, they're drawing on their own mythology. Where it gets weird is when you get Japan trying to sketch out a Western culture, and then it sends in its own influences. The Atelier Salzburg games, the very first Atelier games are like that. Salzburg, town in Germany.
Odin Sphere is another example where they try to use Norse mythology, but it's very, very cliched Japanese RPG as well. Or if you want to also go with their other Vanillaware game, Grim Grimoire, it's essentially Vanillaware's version of Harry Potter.
But with the yokai, and the Atelier games use that as well. The spirits of the different elementals are very much similar to Kami. And once you realize that, oh hey, that fills in a lot of games world, and sometimes they're telling a little joke in there too. So it can be worth going, once you've learned a little bit about the mythology, it's worth going back to your older games and seeing where they're in there. For example, the last town in Castlevania 2 is the town of Yomi. It's a dead town. There's one old woman who is rotting away there. And it's right next to where Dracula is.
And you also have modern games, as I mentioned, The World Ends With You, have a very creative twist of telling these stories, or this kind of method of reincarnation and stuff. It's just something you're not going to pick up until you actually do research about this. And then it hits you like a light bulb. It's like, oh, hey, that's what they're talking about.
So, credits and then any questions. Yokai.com.
Major source for anything Japanese yokai. The person himself has 2 books coming out. One is already published and one is in the making. One we have actually right here, Night of 100 Ghosts, or it's a Night Parade of 100 Demons. And it's a field guide type of thing. It mentions all the yokai, their dietary habits, and all sorts of
and yes, information. By dietary habits we do mean people eating. So sorry.
Or lifestyle.
They don't work. Question in the back?
2 really good books I found for like Yokai and Yuri. They're both $10 each on Amazon. Yokai Attack and Yuri Attack. Like basically what different like yokai and ghost stories are, how to survive an encounter, like habits and all that. That's not going to give you everything, but it's good overview for you.
I've heard of them. I have yet. I'm actively aiming to get my hands on them.
5 minutes? Okay. Yeah. 5. So we have 5 minutes. Other than credits, Walt Disney World, some of the photos were taken from their yokai exhibit that's going on right now. They're discussing yokai and anime. And then finally, various wikis, Conclave, Suikoden, Toho.
Just their respective wikis as well. So
examples, questions, thoughts?
Everyone's too tired. Yes.
2 good anime examples. Nura, Rise of the Yokai Clan.
Yes.
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 There's Amioji, there's
Yokai, the Night 100 Parade.
Exactly.
Yes.
It just clicked. And I mean, it's cheesy, but Rosario Vampire, School of Yokai.
It's actually westernized, because most of those are actually western, but it is a very good idea. Also, if you want to go with gods themselves, Noragami, good manga. It's about a god trying to earn his way back to godhood. He's trying to earn faith. Gods themselves are powered by faith.
It's in the anime now.
It's in the anime now, yes. So, we have 5 minutes. Anyone has any other examples, or we're going to all let you go and get some sleep?
Well, if you want to just watch an entire anime that's about Amioji and having fun and being ridiculous and zany, try watching Mahosho Tangaya Awashi. Because I think you'll be like one of 3 people on Earth who actually watch it.
One other one. Yes? Yes.
See,
Pokemon, exactly.
Yes. Object Pokemon. I know some people derive that it's just they're there, but yes, there's a lot of object Pokemon that are basically Sukumogami or Obake.
Magnetite, Electrode, Rotom.
Yeah, Kone, Ninetales, and so on and so forth. What?
Chandelier as well.
Yup.
One question.
I know it's not an anime, because you referenced what, like American Gods book.
Yes.
Neil Gaiman, also worth a read for the American side of this.
Heavily draws on that, especially with like gods getting more powers of worship and like disappearing and decaying and after forgotten.
That has become so common over the last 15 to 20 years or so that it has almost become a trope. If you go back to older fantasy fiction, whether it's games or books, gods are just kind of there. But more and more we are seeing exactly what you just described. Gods require faith. Without faith, they stop being believed in, disappear and die.
Alright, so that is pretty much our panel. Thank you all for sticking around and joining us. It's our first time, and you guys want to leave us feedback, let us know. We'll definitely improve upon it as well. You all have a great time and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you.